All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Felicia. This is Skills to Counseling, and I am going to be talking today about spiritual abuse, excuse me, and mental health. And so a lot of you have asked me questions about how I believe the two are related, how spiritual abuse can affect your mental health and why it is important as you are recovering from spiritual abuse to also pay attention to your mental health. So I'll wait for a bit till we get some more people, and then I will go right into the topic. I also wanted to just go ahead and describe and explain what spiritual abuse is. A lot of people, I'm trying to fix the camera setting here, are unaware of what spiritual abuse actually means. And so I want to take a minute to just explain what it is and how you can identify it. So spiritual abuse occurs when somebody is using spirituality to manipulate, to control, to either to cause harm or to justify harm. And so those are some ways in which spiritual abuse can occur. And it's important that as you are, watching these videos and looking over your experience, try and identify what sorts of things that you believe were spiritually abusive practices in your experience. The reason I recommend this is the more you can identify the spiritual abuse that you went through and why what happened was spiritually abusive, it puts you in the position to defend against it in the future, protect yourself against it. Something that I'm big on this channel is also prevention. So it's, one thing to go through spiritual abuse, and that's awful, but at the same time, you also want to make sure that you are not going through it again if you don't have to. So just adjust the lighting here. So I'll wait a little bit and see, just see what questions you all have. If you have questions about spiritual abuse and mental health, it's really important that as you, a lot of people have asked me this question. They have a mental health condition, and they're wondering if their spiritual abuse contributed to that. I think that's an important question to ask. And so I'll be covering some of that today as well. So I'll wait for a little bit and see if, we get some more people on. And I'll just go ahead and start, explaining, excuse me, what, the concerns that I feel are important to address with this topic. One thing that is a lot of people may not realize regarding spiritual abuse is that it doesn't just affect the victims from a spiritual perspective. The effects of spiritual abuse are pervasive, and sometimes people don't understand that, and so they get upset and a little bit overwhelmed when they are dealing with the ramifications of the spiritual abuse. So if you are here and you'd like to say hi, go ahead and, put a message in the chat. And also, if you have questions, I'll also be answering some questions as well. So just put a note here. So it's important, like I said, to think about how you feel your experience of spiritual abuse has affected your mental health. One way to do that is to, think about the experiences that you are having. And I want you to think about how your spiritual abuse experience might have shown up as a part of that, right? Sometimes people even wonder, well, what does that mean if it's affecting my mental health? What if I don't have a diagnosis? And you don't necessarily have to have a diagnosis or a mental health diagnosis to be affected by spiritual abuse, and to have your mental health affected by spiritual abuse. So it's important, if you're listening, a good something that would be helpful for you to do is to take some inventory, um, of your life right now, and are there any things that you are struggling with regarding your mental health, and if so, when did those symptoms start? When did you notice that things were getting challenging for you? Was it around the time that you had gone through a spiritually abusive experience? So that's important to take inventory of. um, when people go through spiritual abuse, it can be especially challenging because of how sacred spirituality is for people. A lot of people, and understandably so, look at their spirituality as a safe haven, as a place that should be, safe and be free from the challenges that we go through on a regular basis. And so when that has been tainted by spiritual abuse, excuse me, it can be really hard to, to feel like a whole person again. So I see a few more people here. If you're here, say hi. And if you have a question, definitely put it in the chat so I can answer it, or anything that you would like to discuss. I mean, even though we're discussing spiritual abuse and mental health, we don't only have to talk about that. I welcome any questions along the lines of spiritual abuse. And I also want to just clarify as well, um, that this is educational. So this is not meant to replace any kind of like therapy or consultation with a licensed professional. So I'll wait a little bit and see if anybody has any questions, or you just want to make a comment. So sometimes I get asked, what are some of the common mental health concerns that can come up with spiritual abuse? Sometimes people are curious as to whether certain symptoms are unique to spiritual abuse. In other words, if somebody has gone through spiritual abuse, will their symptoms look different from other people's mental health concerns? And that's a complicated question. I don't think there's really, it really depends on the person, right? I don't think that people who have gone through spiritual abuse all look and react the same way. People have had their experiences, people react to stress and trauma and challenges in different ways. So there isn't a one size fits all picture. Okay, good. I'm seeing some more people here. Just going to put a message here. If you are here for the first time, say hi, or if you're returning, say hi. So those are, so it's important too that we understand that spiritual abuse is not, not spiritual abuse, but the ramifications of spiritual abuse are not a one size fits all sort of thing. People come into the world with different experiences and, just different ways that they react to the world around them. And so it's important that we understand everyone who's been spiritually abused rather, is going to have their own story and their own presentation. Okay, hi, witness bearing. I think you're new here, and welcome. I think the worst symptom, and I'm going to read your comment here. I think the worst symptom, even more than the humiliation, is the confusion after realizing the abuse. It seems now that confusion pervades other aspects of my life. I'm not sure what to trust. If that makes sense. Yeah, it makes perfect sense. A lot of people that have been through spiritual abuse will say that they have difficulty trusting their gut. They have difficulty making even small decisions. And so, if you're really struggling with being indecisive, if you feel like even the smallest decisions are very stressful for you to make, that can be related to the spiritual abuse that you have been through. And we know the confusion that you talk about is also completely normal and expected. When you go into a spiritual environment, you don't expect to deal with, um, to deal with what you're dealing with, right? When we go into spiritual environments, we expect the best. When I say the best, I'm not talking about entitlement. I'm saying that we tend to believe the best about the leaders and the people in those environments. Spirituality is a safe haven and a sanctuary for many. So when something like abuse occurs in that environment, it can be very overwhelming and very disorienting. Um, so yeah, those are some of the things that can come up for people as they are navigating their mental health. Something else I'd like to talk about as well is how spiritually abusive environments react to mental health concerns. From hearing some of y'all's experiences, you've talked about how when you were having mental health concerns, the spiritually abusive environment that you were in made things worse by how they reacted to the the news of your mental health concerns. So that's also something that we can talk about as well. I see some more people coming in. That's great. If you are here and you want to say hi in the chat, please do. Let me know, whatever questions you have or what topics you would want to discuss. See if there are any other comments here that I haven't answered yet or questions. A symptom that can be present is not trusting yourself, being confused. Okay, hi, Rare Breed. I think you've been here before. Good to see you again. The comment says, hi, that church pastor said God was good when he put Satan in our midst. Satan was the best teacher God ever gave me. I'm not sure if you're saying that was what the pastor said or whatnot, but yeah. So maybe you can clarify what you mean by that. But I would, and also too, if any of you would like to share your experiences, that would be great. A lot of times people come here and share what they've been through and really get advice from other people about how to handle things. So I'm just going to put that in the chat. One of the most common symptoms that I hear people discuss when they relay their spiritually abusive experiences is that they feel a lot of anxiety, right? And anxiety is not something that is, that we have to have this big reaction to. People deal with anxiety all the time, and anxiety in of itself isn't very bad, but it's not this thing that we have to villainize or say that it's bad. It's normal to be anxious in certain situations, but when it becomes excessive, then that's when you want to pause and figure out, what's going on and what you might need to do about it. And when people have been through spiritual abuse, they often talk about feeling anxious and feeling anxious in situations that they didn't used to feel anxious about. So that's also something to pay attention to. And that anxiety can come from many places. People have shared their experiences and have talked about how they have felt that they were sort of under surveillance in these environments. So people are asking them about their whereabouts. They feel like they're under a microscope, so to speak. And so if you feel constantly criticized and analyzed, then you're going to also feel anxious. So that can be a symptom as well. Or some people have talked about how their pre-existing mental health concerns got worse due to the spiritual abuse. And that can be for a lot of other reasons as well. Anytime somebody is going through stress, that can make symptoms worse. And spiritual abuse is a pervasive stress because of how important spirituality is to many of us. So that's also something to consider too. So I'm going to look here and see if there are, any questions or comments, and I'll also, share some of my insights about, how I think the two are related. Okay, I see a comment here. Spiritual abuse has greatly aggravated my autistic and mood disorder, greatly elevated my anger, resentment, depression symptoms. Yeah, I'm really sorry to hear that. And, unfortunately, I'm not surprised by what you said. When people go through spiritual abuse, a lot of the concerns that they're already having can be made worse. If you think about it, dealing with mental illness and mental health concerns takes a toll on you already, right? There are things you're going to need to do managing medication. If you take medication, therapy appointments, just dealing with the ramifications of how your symptoms affect your everyday life. And then when you put spiritual abuse on top of that, that can make things even worse. And a lot of people look to spirituality as a safe place, as a haven, a place where they can just, I guess, be themselves and get the healing and the help that they need. And so I liken it to, imagine that you're sick and you go to the hospital, and then when you go to the hospital, you feel even worse. The stuff that they are giving you is making you feel worse. Oh, hey, Terrell. How are you doing? Good to see you. Usually we're just talking about safe space, and that's the name of Terrell's channel, Safe Space with V Terrell Hill. So I always enjoy seeing you in the lives. Terrell and I have done a couple of we did a video together. And so if you look on his channel or my channel, it's there. And Terrell also does, Terrell does a lot of, he's really, good with just helping people process the experiences that they have had in a safe place. So I'd encourage you to just check out his channel, and he has some really, just different tools and just different insights there. So it's always good to see you, Terrell. Thanks for stopping by. All right, I see another comment here. My blood pressure has been up, and that stress can also cause ocular migraines or as in headaches. I've had those too. Yeah. I have a video on the channel about how spiritual abuse can affect your physical health. So our minds and our bodies are not separate. They're connected. And so anytime you're going through any sort of emotional stress, it's going to show up in your body and vice versa. So it wouldn't surprise me that your blood pressure has been going up. When people have been through spiritual abuse, they say that they don't feel safe. And so if you don't feel safe, then, you're going to have concerns, and it's going to show up in your body. So that's something to think about as well. I'm seeing more people here. If you are here, say hi. Yeah, not to interrupt, but it's time for us to collab again, Terrell. Yeah, I agree, Terrell. Let me know. That would be good. I always enjoy hearing your insights, and yeah, that'd be great. You're not interrupting at all. Not at all. So yeah. Hi, I see Jerry here. Hello, how are you? It looks like you're new, Jerry. I don't think I've seen you here before. So welcome. And any questions or topics you guys want to discuss, just put it in the chat. We don't have to just stick to spiritual abuse and mental health. So, but I will say that, what some of you have been bringing up in the comments section is how your physical health suffers as a result of spiritual abuse. If something else that a lot of you have talked about is not getting sleep, right? Feeling like you're not sleeping well, even having nightmares or stressful dreams about your spiritual experience. If you are going through something like this and it's coming up in your dreams, then that's I would say a pretty important sign that something's not right. So that's something to pay attention to as well. And, when we think about how our bodies respond to not feeling safe, the things like you have talked about in the comments, you all have mentioned things like migraines, headaches. Sometimes people have mentioned that they will get really bad stomach pains before they go to whatever spiritual environment they're in. They'll talk about having things like really bad muscle tension. They realize that during the sermon or whatever, they're grinding their teeth and clenching their fists because they're just expecting something bad to happen. The video on this was released yesterday about being talked about from the pulpit. Have you ever been in a sermon before and talked about from the pulpit? And people have shared their experiences there. So I encourage you to go check out that video because it talks about that. But if you are in a situation, you're in an environment where you are afraid that you are going to be shamed or talked about from the pulpit, then you're going to feel anxious and it's going to show up in your body. Hi, Vivian. Vivian says that's good right there, doctor. We should definitely be better after seeking healing. I'm blessed to be in a great spiritual community now, but it took 40 years to find and vet the leadership. Yeah. It takes a while. It's not going to be something that you can just like jump right into. And so I'm glad that, it's unfortunate that it took for so long, but I'm glad that you found a place that is good. Okay, I see a question here from Terrell. It says, how does one deal with Stockholm syndrome when you're dedicated to a spiritual leader who has abused you? Wow, that's a good question. That's a really good question. And there really isn't an easy answer to that. I think a lot of it is just awareness, right? And understanding why there's that allegiance. If you think about a lot of these spiritual leaders can act sometimes like parental figures for us. And so, if you think about parents or children who have been abused by their parents, a lot of times they are very reluctant to separate from those parents, even though those parents are not treating them well. And so I think part of it is just to understand where your own conflict is coming from, right? And not to beat yourself up. That attachment to that leader is done is part of survival, right? If you are in a spiritual environment and that person has abused you, they probably also have helped you in some ways, right? If somebody was all bad to us all the time, it'd be easy to leave. But many of these spiritually abusive leaders and environments have good things with them. Some of them have rescued people when they're at a really low point in their lives. They might have provided emotional or financial assistance. And so there's going to be that bond there. And when there's that bond that has been created through that experience, it doesn't have to be a traumatic experience. It could be, but that bond is there. And so it's going to be very difficult to break that. And so I would say the first step is really trying to find people outside the environment that you can run things by. If you have a friend maybe that doesn't go to that spiritual community and you tell them, hey, I've been dealing with this, or this is what's going on, you can hear their perspective, and they're going to have a very different perspective from somebody who's in that environment. And that can be a little bit of a wake-up call, but give yourself time. I would say don't rush into anything in a way that would make you lose your objectivity. So if you can break things down, make a step-by-step plan to leave, and understand and prepare for the inevitable resistance, that would be very helpful, because you have to know that you're going to have a hard time leaving. It's not going to be just this easy black and white decision. But that's a great question, and thanks for asking that, Terrell. I hope that answered your question. See another question here, or comment says, sick at your stomach going to church. Yeah. So even, think about when you are about to head to church or wherever it is. How do you feel, in your body? Are you getting headaches before you have to go? Are you finding, even the night before, you start dreading it and thinking, oh, I'm going to have to see this person and I'm going to have to explain this. If you find yourself rehearsing what you're going to say a lot before you step into a spiritual environment, that's a huge clue that it is not a safe or healthy place, and it is affecting your mental health. So that's something to think about too. A lot of times people too have felt that that they went into a spiritually abusive environment, and they felt not only did their mental health symptoms get worse, but their perspective on their mental health changed, right? And so they might go into the environment believing, okay, I have a mental health issue, I need to get help for it, to believing that maybe that it's their fault. They go into a lot of self-blame because of what the environment has told them about their mental health concerns, or they might be in denial about it because they're told that having mental health concern is reflective of a moral failure or not being a good enough, either Christian or whatever religion um, that's there. So they can change people's perspectives on their own mental health functioning. And then, okay, I see another question from Terrell. Is it uncommon to still have benevolence toward a spiritual abuser after you left from up under their leadership? Not at all. In fact, I would expect that. When you think about the bond that someone has to their spiritual leaders, some people regard their spiritual leaders as a big missing piece for their life. Think about how many people go to a spiritual environment and they say, this is my family, right? Either maybe the concept of family was forced on them, but regardless of the reason, that spiritually abusive environment and that leader functions as a sort of family for them. And so if you ask anybody who's been abused by a parent or a family member, 9 times out of 10, they're going to tell you that, they still have some positive regard toward that person, because there are going to be good times that bonded, you together. And at the same time, when we think about that with spiritual abuse, that it functions the same way, right? A spiritually abusive leader can be, can kind of come in and rescue you, right? And so you associate that turning point in your life with that leader. So basically, to answer the question, Terrell, it's not uncommon at all. In fact, as part of your recovery, anytime I work with people, I always tell them, as part of your recovery, that's something to expect and to have compassion on yourself for. Terrell says, I'm about to take advantage of this live session. Yeah, ask away, ask as many questions as you want. See another question here, or a comment. Now that I left that church and I got banned at 8 others since 2011, I don't have any options but remain alone on church days. Yeah, that's awful. And I'm hearing a lot about that. I'm going to ask you guys in the chat, have any of you ever experienced like being banned from other spiritual places because of one place? It's kind of like getting blacklisted. Meaning that maybe you had a bad experience or you've been banned from one place and then word spreads and you can't go anywhere else. So I want to hear from you all if that's ever happened to you. So yeah, that can happen. Yes, the entire community of friends turned after I left. That's something I hear quite a lot. A lot of people have said that once they left that environment, that everybody that was their friend stopped talking to them. It's almost like they didn't exist. People will say that they ran into the person at the grocery store and that person just gave them this blank look like they didn't even exist. And that is, for some people, that can be one of the most painful experiences regarding the abuse, because they think, were these people ever my friends? And they wonder, what did I go through? Like, were these people who they said they were? I've actually had the opposite, people harassing me to come back after I choose to leave. Okay, yeah, that can also happen too, right? People have talked about how they've gotten threatening messages, threatening phone calls, basically saying you can't leave until we let you leave. And that's awful as well. It's control. Either way, trying to punish people for leaving by ignoring them or pretending they don't exist, or being threatened and harassed. That's why I always tell people, if you're leaving a spiritually abusive environment, make sure that your social media is is not telling on you and not giving more information that these people can use against you. So yeah, that harassment is real, and so that's, that's an unfortunate experience. Um, And so, yeah, so you said, Rare Breed says you've had that in non-church situations too with a career. I melted down in 2001. It tore me up so much I had not been able to work since. So, yeah, these things, I have a video on this too, that the things, the dynamics we see in spiritually abusive environments are not just limited to those environments. They can happen at home, they can happen in the workplace, they can happen anywhere. It's not limited to location. Someone else says, "Hi, Michelle. Not banned, but just publicly smeared and blacklisted in some very important ways I can't really do anything about." Yeah. Um, yeah, the things like this happen. And it's really unfortunate. And there's only so much one can do in these situations. And so you have to ask yourself, is it worth it for me to continue to fight about this, or do I just want to move on? And there's no easy answer to that, but it is something to think about. Um, and the smear campaigns, it really is, I would say, concerning to see the levels that people will go to in these types of environments to punish somebody for leaving, making up rumors, just doing all kinds of things to punish that person for asserting their independence. So it's good to see, it's good to see all of you here. Again, for those of you who are just coming in now, we're talking about spiritual abuse and mental health, and specifically not only how spiritual abuse affects your mental health, but how spiritually abusive environments view mental health concerns. Oh, that's a good one. Yeah. Rare Breed here says, pastors tell me I lack faith, which is why I'm not healed of mental illness. Constantly lecture me, and constantly lecturing you and like a pity party in church. Yeah. So that is, a lot. The whole lack of faith thing is big. People have been told that about their mental health. The reason you have this mental health condition is because you don't have enough faith. Same thing with physical concerns, right? So if you haven't been healed of something, but I'm hearing it a lot more with mental health now. There was a time where people used to use that you don't have enough faith, that's why you're not healed with physical issues, but it's trending more toward mental health now. And I think part of it is because mental health is more openly discussed right now, and people are more open about discussing mental health concerns and getting therapy and things like that. And so people will be told that, and they'll either be told they don't have enough faith, it's something that they did, equating it to some sort of moral failure. And there are lots of reasons why mental health concerns pop up. And so for someone to say, well, it's because of this thing that you did, is quite presumptuous and not even accurate. Okay, so I see here, the biggest hurdle is what I call the God wound, redefining how God feels about you after his servants cursed you. Yeah, that's one of the most, I would say, egregious aspects of spiritual abuse, because regardless of whatever a spiritually abusive leader or anybody says, they are in essence kind of a proxy for God in that sense. I'm not saying that they take the place of God, but when they are speaking, when they are interacting with you, they're basically doing that on behalf of God, right? And so when people have these negative experiences, they equate how they were treated with how God views them. And so it can be really difficult for people to like untangle God from what people are doing in his name, or what they're saying when they're supposedly speaking for him. I mean, how many times have you all heard, God told me to tell you this, right? That's one huge red flag. I tell people, if someone is telling you this repeatedly, that's a red flag. I feel like that's something that is quite manipulative, because what that environment is telling you is that you are not I guess, good enough or capable of hearing God's voice for yourself. And so they are putting themselves in the place of God. And a good leader will say, I let me invite you to learn more about God with me. They're leading you and inviting you instead of putting things on you and saying, that they are the ones in the place of God. So yeah, what you said, Terrell, is that God wound is really healing from that is an essential part of recovery from spiritual abuse, because it can be very difficult to detangle the two. God himself, and then the way people are claiming to speak for God. And it's something that you have to do with your head as well as your heart. You might have an intellectual knowledge that the two are separate, but working that out in your heart and your life can be really hard. Yeah, and someone else here says that if they feel like this has made them more unChrist-like and turned them away from God, and they feel like it's counterproductive. And that can be, another fault lies. People, someone who's gone through that won't want to have anything to do with, with whatever environment that they came from that was abusive. You're saying that you hear that as well. I'm assuming you're talking about the whole God told me thing. Yes, shunning. Church people often shun others who leave or speak out against abusive spiritual environments. Not the love of Christ. I've experienced it. Yeah, a lot of you have. And that shunning is just another way of control. They can't control. It's almost like because they couldn't stop you from leaving, they're going to punish you for doing so. All right. Smooth Operator says they told me God told them for me to stay and not leave the church, and stayed for another year, shaking my head. Yeah. Well, don't beat yourself up for that. If you think about it, these people who claim to speak for God are taking advantage of one's desire to know God. When people come to these environments, they want to feel like they can hear from God, and they want to do what God says, right? They want to be close to God. And so an abusive person will take advantage of that. I'm gonna ask you all in the comments too if you have ever heard that. So that is something to watch out for sure. And another thing that is so frustrating about that whole God told me thing is that if you disagree with that person, they've set it up so that if you disagree with that person, then you disagree with God, right? And so, if someone is that confident that God is telling them to tell you something, then they should be confident enough for you to hear from God for yourself. So when people bank on this, oh, God told me to tell you this, it gets to be, it's just a sign to me that that person is not to be trusted. Okay, Michelle says it feels more like a religious brand war, as if these groups want you to think their way is the only game in town and that on your own you aren't enough. I don't agree at all. Yeah, that is really that's a very specific and very accurate way of placing it, right? It's kind of like this us versus them mentality. So here we are, and here's everybody else. And if you are not with us, then you are against us. And it's not a healthy way of viewing the world and viewing other people. And so when you talk about this, and it's interesting too, Michelle, because when you talk about this religious brand war, it's almost like that brand is really associated with the personality of that leader, right? It's more about this is what makes us separate and unique, and it's more about that personality or leader than it is about true spirituality. Yeah, Terrell says absolutely to Michelle Hill, and also yes, their words equate to God's word. Yeah, and then also someone else says, Rare Breed here says, most definitely yes. Tell me if I disagree with God, then I disagree with them. Yeah. So that comes straight out of control. And think about it, when people have talked about feeling anxious and feeling like they are struggling to make even the smallest of decisions, well, of course you're going to feel that way. You've been in an environment that tells you you're not fill in the blank enough to hear from God for yourself. And so that really strips somebody of their agency. They don't feel like they feel that they have to depend on others to make the right decision. It's something that happens, it sneaks up on you. So it's something to be aware of and something to have compassion for yourself about, because it's not something that you just decided to give to someone else. I'm just going to give away my free will. It doesn't work like that. So I'd like to hear from you all. What other ways do you feel like spiritual abuse affects your mental health? Some of you have talked about feeling angry and dealing with this anger. And I think that there are different reasons for that. I mean, obviously, it would make sense for you to be angry, given, thinking about just what the abuse has taken away from you. And so I've had people tell me before that they didn't really struggle with anger. And after the abuse, they have a lot of not only anger, but sometimes rage and also resentment. And in some of these environments, they really want to police how you feel. And that can affect your mental health too. So some people have said that they've been in places where they were told that it was a sin for them to be angry. So if they ever show that they're upset about something or they don't like something, then they're automatically in sin because of being angry. So yeah, Rare Breed here says, church tried to control my relationships and called you a liar when you were leaving the pastor. Someone else, Move Operator here says, I've struggled with believing if God is real. Yeah, that's, you're not alone with that. A lot of people have talked about how they felt the same way. Michelle says, I'm not angry, just weary of joining or feeling pressured to. Yeah. And that can also affect your mental health too, because some of these environments and these leaders are very persistent. Some of you have talked about how you've gotten, tons of texts within a short period of time asking you something over and over again. Where are you? Are you going to give us money for this? Whatever it is, and just getting repeated texts, and that's harassment. And of course, that's going to affect your mental health. See a comment here. They told me not to take medicine for pain and to put my trust in God. Yeah. And people have been given similar advice, right? Stop taking medicine for whatever thing that you are, whatever condition you have, and being shamed for taking medicine. People have gotten that message about their mental health concerns. And so they're told, don't take medicine for that anymore. Or they might not they may not tell you to, to not take medicine. They might tell you instead that, well, people who do take medicine are weak and they have issues. Oh, it was great seeing you tonight too, Terrell. Yeah, you be blessed as well. It's always a pleasure having you here. Have a great night. Oh boy. So I see another comment here. Someone said they had a dream that they went to jail and a bigwig in the church owned the jail and had them incarcerated. Yeah, I'm wondering if that was symbolic in any way. Maybe that might have represented some kind of control, and people in these environments can be very, very controlling. And so, people who are dealing with mental health concerns deal with a lot of shame on top of that because of how their mental illness is construed in these environments and how people will talk about it. So, there are several ways in which spiritual abuse can affect your mental health. And that's why it's very important that you have people outside the spiritually abusive environment that can help you understand, help you see things from a different perspective. Okay, I see another comment here. I feel closer to God and that God is enough. The personal relationship is substantial. I think that they are mad that I haven't lost control and remain sane. Yeah. I think that when you come out of these environments, sometimes they have this mindset that they want to punish you. People have talked about how they felt punished for leaving. Feeling you always want to be careful when somebody is acting like they need to be in the place of God for your life, right? A good leader will encourage you to be independent and to examine God for yourself. They're not going to be the ones who are acting like they're in the place of God, right? So if there's a big decision you need to make, a healthy leader will say, here's some advice if you want it, and help you get to where you feel comfortable thinking for yourself instead of saying, no, I need to approve what you're going to do. You need to get my permission, right? If there's something in your personal life decision that you need to make, you don't need to get their permission to do something in your life. See another comment here. I don't have any support. Everyone thinks I'm crazy. I had to learn to cope alone. It ain't easy sometimes. Yeah. When these environments work in such a way where they isolate you from other people, and so it's hard to get that support if they are working from this place of trying to control you and isolate you. They do this so you can be dependent on them. So it's not easy at all. I'm sorry you're having to go through that. So, as we think about how spiritual abuse affects mental health, your recovery process from whatever mental health concerns you're going through has to involve and acknowledge how spiritual abuse has affected that. And so I was saying that at the beginning of this live stream, that as you are looking through, taking inventory of what you're going through from a mental health perspective, try and connect your spiritually abusive experience to that. What sorts of patterns are you seeing? Did you notice that symptoms perhaps got worse when certain things in the spiritual environment were going in a particular direction? Things like that are important to pay attention to. So, are there any other questions or comments that you have about spiritual abuse and mental health? Questions or comments? And it doesn't have to necessarily be about spiritual abuse and mental health. It can be about other topics related to spiritual abuse as well. Okay, I see a question here. I think they isolate you to try to make you want to come back as if you would. I don't think so. Why? Well, the isolation part is, if you think about abusive romantic relationships, right? The abusive partner will often tell the person that they're abusing that nobody else will want you, or you try and go out there and make it on your own and see how it is, or you'll be back, right? Not only with romantic partners, but it can also happen in abusive families too. And so the spiritually abusive environment functions in a similar manner. And so they're basically, by isolating you, they want to make you dependent on them, because when you are dependent on them, you're not going to venture out on your own. You're going to look to them for all of your resources. Yeah, someone else is mentioning just turning to substances and how that was a challenge for them. And yeah, sometimes when people are going through mental health concerns, there are different ways that people cope. Oh, that's nice of you, Vivian. Vivian says, just thank you for being here this evening, Doctor. Of course. I enjoy interacting with all of you and hearing and answering your questions. So yeah, when we think about how our mental health can be affected, Also, keep in mind physical health too. Some of you have talked about getting migraines, getting stomach aches, feeling pain and tension in your body, excuse me, things like that. And that just shows, it reinforces the concept of how our minds and our bodies are connected. So if there's disruption in the body, it can affect our emotions, how we think, and also when we're dealing with stress and having, psychological concerns, it's also going to show up in our body. So it's important to pay attention to that. Okay, I'm looking here to see if I have answered all the questions and addressed all the comments. Let's see. Sorry to hear that. Here, a comment here says it was a toxic, abusive day in the workplace today. That abuse demon is everywhere. Fight, fight, fight. Yeah, it can be, something that is really unfortunate about spiritual abuse is that people who have experienced it have talked about how they were concurrently dealing with um, the, abuse and manipulation in other settings, right? Maybe they are dealing with a romantic relationship or marriage where there is abuse going on, or maybe they come from an abusive family system. And so when people are going through that at the same time, or right after or before spiritual abuse, it can really take a toll on people. And that's where, sometimes that hopelessness can come in. And so it's important, to see where that comes from, but also something that I'm really learning. Well, I would say learning, something that's just really encouraging to see is how many of you have talked about how you have grown from these experiences and how you've learned and how it's developed resilience. And so I think it's really encouraging to see that. And I think a lot of people who have been through spiritual abuse, whether they realize it or not, are more resilient than they think. Yeah. Okay, there are a couple questions here that I'm seeing. How do I even begin rebuilding amidst confusion? And how do I find true community? And there are no easy answers to that. I would say the number one thing you want to do is be very patient and take your time, because it's going to be a process. You didn't get into that spiritually abusive environment. You didn't get hooked into it overnight. And so finding a new place and finding true community is going to take time. And so I would say be patient. Try and look for places and people who have values that are very far apart from your spiritually abusive environment, right? So one easy thing to do is, I shouldn't say it's easy. I would say maybe an easier thing to do is to look at building community in places that are outside spiritual places. So maybe it is a hobby you have. Maybe are part of, I don't know, a knitting group or a book club or doing something with sports, something that you can do for yourself and something that does not have anything like heavy and philosophical, emotional, spiritual related to it, right? Like if you think about just popping into a book club every couple of weeks or once a month, or being part of, a group of people that maybe like run together, or, a sports team, or whatever it is you like, that is light. That is something where you're going to have fun with people and you're going to build relationships around other things related that are not related to spirituality, right? And so I'm there. You can't like just escape toxic and manipulative and controlling people. So you might find people like that maybe at a book club or a sports team, but it's probably not going to be as big of a deal as it is in a spiritually abusive environment. Usually people are there just to hang out and learn and have fun. And so look for fun things that you can do, nothing heavy. And also change, do different things. In spiritually abusive environments, they tend to really be very careful. They tend to be very controlling about even the type of media you're exposed to. So you can't read these books. You can only read these books. So read different books. Go to different places. Explore. Make new friendships, and they don't have to be deep friendships. It can just be, hey, I'm going to grab coffee with this person one day and keep it light. I hope that helps. Okay, Michelle says, why are other people inclined to believe the abusers? That is a great question. And that is something that that I would say is a red flag for spiritual abuse and spiritually abusive environments. These environments function in such a way that they place the needs of the spiritually abusive leader above everyone else. So healthy leadership looks like prioritizing the needs of the people that you're serving, right? The leaders are there to serve and to help and to bring out the best in the people that they're leading. But in spiritually abusive environments, it's the other way around. The system functions to put the needs and the image of the leader above everything else. And so, a spiritually abusive leader, they're going to be very careful who they have in their inner circle. The people that they're going to be around them, the people that are going to be supporting them, are people that are basically going to be an echo chamber. And people that are more prone to calling somebody out for doing something wrong, asking questions, exploring critical thinking and independent thinking, they're not going to be part of that group. And so that's why people are often inclined to believe the abusers, and if they have the spiritually abusive system behind them. So people who engage in spiritual abuse, they have these people around them, they enable them, they make excuses for their spiritually abusive behavior, or they will find ways to cover it up, or dismiss people's concerns. I don't know how many times I've heard people say that they went to leadership and said, hey, this is a problem, and they were just dismissed, or they were even punished for coming forward with their concerns. So I hope that answers your question, Michelle, about why other people are inclined to believe the abusers. Also, spiritually abusive people are very manipulative, and so they will do whatever they need to do to get ahead of the story. The video that I released yesterday about being talked about in sermons is one way spiritually abusive leaders do this. It doesn't have to be a sermon. It could be a speech or some kind of talk, but they'll get ahead of the story by discussing your business in the pulpit and spinning it from their perspective. So that is one way. That's another way. The rules and the way the system operates is always in benefit of the leader. So I see more people coming in. If you are new here, say hi. And also ask any questions that you like. These questions are great. I appreciate you guys taking time to ask thoughtful questions. Let's see what else. I think there are a few comments and questions that have come up here. I wouldn't trade the wisdom I've gained from my unwanted experiences. That's a very healthy perspective. There's something called post-traumatic growth, in which people after traumas have grown and gained new things, whether it's knowledge, perspectives, and whatnot. So I want to get away from the idea that difficult things and trauma are this bad thing that nobody can ever recover from. A lot of you show a lot of resilience, and you come out of these situations, emerging with a new perspective. It's not to say that, oh, well, because of what happened to you, that now because you have a new perspective, then you should just kind of dismiss what happened and or minimize it. That's not what I'm saying at all, but it's great to see how you've grown from that experience. I'm exploring new interests and new circles of friends. Yes, that's great, especially new interests. Sometimes people don't realize how controlling these environments are until after they leave and they say, oh, I never even thought I could do this, or it never occurred to me to try this thing or travel here or do this and do that. And that's because of how restrictive these environments can be. I was never allowed to enter those inner circles. Now I understand why. Yeah, those environments, they're very picky about who they choose, right? And sometimes they will, we talked about this before about making making people and breaking them, right? So they might have their number one person, and then they make an example of them, and that's sends a message to everyone else that if you cross us, this is what's going to happen. I ask too many questions. Yeah, these environments don't like you asking too many questions. They might say you're critical, you have a critical spirit, or you're rebellious, or whatever insult they have for the day. All right, I see another question here. Can't a person experience great pain and not be traumatized? Yes, that's true. That's very true, right there. In fact, there's a whole field of studies dedicated to this in psychology that are looking at resilience. And so, how are there people that go through these really difficult experiences and are not traumatized? So, if you're interested in that, you can look up things like resilience. And yeah, even when we think about trauma, you can go through trauma and not be traumatized. And so that's also important to know. Only it's really, after if you look at the percentages, only a small percentage of people will go on after a traumatic event to develop PTSD. It's not saying that trauma doesn't affect people, but I want people to be careful of this idea that trauma is this thing that has like indelible effects on you, or you're kind of like just screwed forever if you've experienced trauma. I think that in the, people talk about psychology in lots of spaces outside academia and mental health arenas. And sometimes this sentiment is going around that trauma changes people forever, and basically they are destined for whatever is supposed to happen to people who experience trauma. And it can be very limiting and also very burdensome for someone to hear. People have been kind of told, either indirectly or directly, that because of trauma, that they are going to be limited in what they can do and the potential they can reach. And I just don't believe that. I believe that people can be very resilient, and it's something that can be learned. It doesn't mean that negative experiences don't affect us, but it doesn't have to permanently change who you are for bad, right? And so we have to be careful of having that viewpoint about trauma and traumatic experiences. And, from what people have shared here, a lot of you are talking about how you've gained new insights from the spiritually abusive experience that you had. You advocate for others more, you advocate for yourself more, you are more assertive, you are, your BS detector is honed and accurate. And so you have this way of knowing sooner rather than later where manipulation and control are trying to, work their effects on you when you get out of those situations. So I think that it's, having that viewpoint is a great way to enter into your recovery journey. I agree with you wholeheartedly. I'm a better human in some ways, humbled, not broken. Yeah. Something else to think about or look into is the concept of anti-fragility. And basically that is the belief or the concept that something is actually stronger after it's been broken. So I think with bones, there's this belief, I think that if you break a bone and when it gets healed, it's stronger than it was before, right? And so think about examples, either, through literature or, any other domain in which something is actually better after being broken, right? Or after being fractured, that's stronger than it was before. And so that's something to look up and, learn from the concept of anti-fragility. So mindset has a lot to do with this as well. You can acknowledge trauma and very bad experiences and still be committed to being better as a result of it. It's hard work, but it definitely is possible. So what other questions do you have or comments? You're welcome. Says I have a comment that says thank you for dissecting that. So what other questions? I'm looking here to see if I've missed anything. And I'm also putting a question here in the chat, stories or experiences about how you've grown, after either trauma or spiritual abuse. It's important. And sometimes, even if you can identify with it, looking, reading stories or listening to other people's experiences can also be beneficial. There's a video I have on my channel about the surprising strengths of spiritually abusive or spiritual abuse survivors, rather. So that can be something that you can look at as well to, understand how you can grow from these sorts of experiences. So that's something to think about. And also too, even with the mental health, concerns, some things that people have told me is that they'll say that they dealt with mental health concerns while they're in a spiritually abusive environment, but they didn't get any help for it. They felt ashamed to get help. But once they left that environment and they realized how they were being treated because of their mental health concerns, it motivated them to get help for it once and for all, and so it's important to understand how the spiritually abusive environment can have a negative effect on your recovery process. And for some people, leaving that environment gave them the freedom to get the help they needed for their mental health concerns. I'm going to put here in the chat the link to the video about surprising strengths of spiritual abuse survivors. So I'm going to put that here in the chat. But I also like to hear from any of you about your own experiences or what you perceive your strengths to be, or even strengths of other people. For some people, they have talked about how they become very independent after a situation like that, after going through an experience where you feel like, the rug's been pulled out from under you. All the supports you had are gone. Being shunned, being isolated, and having to start over again. People have shared that experience gave them the confidence to approach other things that they were anxious about. They'll say something along the lines of, if they could start over after losing all those connections and support and whatnot, then they feel like they can take on the world. That other things that seem very scary or intimidating before aren't so much anymore. So those are some other things to consider. Consider how and even, for some people, just leaving that spiritually abusive environment can improve their mental health. That's just one less stressor you have to deal with. Yeah. I can't, say the word, but someone here is saying that the most tragic things of spiritual abuse and combination of mental illness is unaliving oneself. Yeah. And that, unfortunately, can be part of what someone goes through. And that's really tragic, for someone to be feeling that hopeless to take that route. Oh, I like this comment. I think I survived because I knew I didn't deserve it and knew they were wrong. No matter how powerful they appeared, something always felt off. I like that. Yeah, we can, we have our intuition for a reason. Some of, you will say that even in the midst of that experience and going through what you went through, a part of you knew that, something's wrong here. Something's not right with this. And I'm going to do what I need to do to get things right. And so I think that's a great attitude. And, sometimes when we think about our intuition and how it can be affected through our mental health, and how, I guess how mental health can feel like it's going down the drain when you're spiritually abused. The important thing to remember is that your intuition is still there and it's always there, and you can grow that back again. Okay, see someone new here. Hi, Tom. Wow, this is so helpful. Thank you. You're very welcome, Tom. It's nice to have you here. Oh, that's okay. Someone said I didn't mean to say a no word. I'll do that. I just know how YouTube is, and I know that if you say certain things, they'll flag your video or whatnot. So, but I understand what you said, and you made an important comment there. It's unfortunate. I think that one thing that I don't like about, I think one thing that's very tragic when spiritually abusive environments dismiss mental health concerns is that things like that can happen, and then there's the sentiment of, oh no, this person, ended their life, and oh, how could we have prevented this? And one way you could have prevented it was just to listen to them and not added insult to injury by telling them that they are a bad person because they are dealing with mental health concerns. It's the equivalent of kicking somebody while they're down, right? And people can have, beliefs about how spirituality can affect mental health, but there's a time and a place and a way to address somebody who is hurting and who is really going through some very difficult mental health concerns. So, thank you, Rare Breed, for bringing that up. There's nothing to apologize for. I think it's great. It's something that people need to be aware of. See another comment here. I always held a part of me back. I'm a natural skeptic. Good. Don't lose that. It's good to be skeptical, and spiritually abusive environments love to shame people for being skeptical and for asking questions, right? It's good to ask questions. It's good to be skeptical. It's good to you want to see proof for certain things, right? If we do this, if you ask questions before you buy a home or, agree to sign a contract for a job, that's not being skeptical. So how much more in a spiritual environment, you should ask questions. A major problem in these environments is called stonewalling, or like said, they won't let you talk when you need to. Yeah, that's very effective. That's basically using the power of a group against somebody. And so people have talked about how, they realized, maybe they asked a question or they expressed concern about something, and then they realized that now they're blocked on social media. People have talked about how their keys to the church were like the locks were changed or something, where their church office was, or they were blocked on social media, or all of a sudden they, lost access to stuff that was theirs. It might have been a group chat or even their own, like, intellectual property, whatever. So that's also a passive aggressive way of communication. So it's basically saying, well, since you did this thing that we didn't like, we're going to cut you off, but we're not going to talk about it. And so not only are you isolated from others, and you're now doubting yourself and wondering, well, what did I do? Why did this happen? How did this happen? So I like the idea of holding a part of yourself back. Spiritually abusive environments will oftentimes act entitled to certain things that are yours, right? They might feel entitled to knowing personal information that you're not yet ready to share. People need to not only earn your trust, but maintain your trust. And so there's nothing wrong with holding yourself back. You can share what you want with people when you are ready and when they've proven to you that they are capable of handling that information with care and respect. So so that's it's good to be skeptical. There's a woman named Diane Langberg that has written a book about spiritual abuse, and she recommends that when you go to a new place or checking it out, sit in the back and be the first one to leave, if you feel comfortable doing so. If you want to stay and chat, sure, but you have every right to move slowly and to require certain things of people. When I say require certain things, you want people to demonstrate that they are trustworthy, and that they can maintain that trust over time. So these are great comments. See something here too. I terminated everything on my social media myself, and they knew it when I cut them off. Yeah, and if you need to cut people off on social media, do so. When sometimes these spiritually abusive environments engage in inappropriate behavior, showing up at people's homes or contacting their relatives and just really overstepping boundaries. And so whatever you need to do to keep yourself and your information safe, do so. Your mental health is important. And another red flag is if you are in a spiritual environment and you feel like your mental health has gone downhill since you've been in that environment, that is an indicator that maybe that's not the place for you. And try and figure out why that's the case. For some people, they feel like their mental health is negatively affected because of how much they're having to do all the time. So the environment expecting them to be available all the time. And, you need to be available to do this, you need to help in this area. Basically, they just feel worked to the bone. And that's not fair for a group to expect you to just give and give and give of yourself as if, you don't have any limits. Oh, wow. Someone said that they had pastors at her home trying to move another man in with you and tell you how to arrange your furniture. Wow, that's totally out of line. And so another thing that I tell people is, look, if you're going to, go to a new place, be careful of the information that you share with them. You don't have to fill out all the information. Don't put your home address if you don't want to. Or ask them what they're going to do with that information. Some of these places will just give out people's information like that. If you think about like a school or a club or something, a lot of times you have to give them permission to share your address and the directory. So, think about that. And I would say don't put your address there until you feel comfortable doing so. So just things like that. Safeguard your information. See another comment here. You also suggested we pay attention to how they treat us when we say no. Yes, that's huge. So practice saying no, or practice having them wait for something, right? If they're like, oh, we need someone to sign up to, provide childcare for this event. Are you available to next Saturday to do that? You can say, you know what, I'll get back to you. Or you can say no and look at how they react. If you say, I'll let you know in a week. And between now and the week, they're messaging you every day. That's a huge red flag. Or, trying to pressure you. And that affects mental health as well. When people talk about feeling anxious and, feeling like there's this feeling of doom, like another shoe is going to drop, why wouldn't you feel that way if you're in an environment where people are not even respecting your no? How's that going to make you feel? You're not going to feel safe there. You're going to feel scared. You're going to feel always on edge because what you are saying is not being respected. Yeah, or giving out your phone number and sending multiple texts and emails. Yeah. Oh my goodness. I really don't like that. And places can, if this were to happen in a non-spiritual environment, they can get in trouble for that. So be careful. Use the block button, or whatever you need to. If you need to block people, block them. Um, things like that. And it's really important, to get, if you need to get law enforcement involved, do that. A lot of these environments will tell people, well, you need to settle matters within in-house, and you have to do this. No, you don't. If people are uh, interacting with you in ways that make you feel threatened or intimidated or unsafe, do not hesitate to get law enforcement involved in the way you feel comfortable. Use whatever resources you have at your disposal. I mean, obviously, you want to talk to them first and let them know, hey, I don't appreciate my information being given out, take it off. But if they're not going to listen to that, then do what you need to do. Um, wow, someone said that a church member came to their house raging and it was time to call the cops. Yeah. Yeah, you need to be these basically with these places. I talk about this in another one of my videos. It's called the halo effect, and we tend to assume that these spiritual environments are not going to hurt us. They're there to help us. It's a safe place. And as much as we want to believe things like that, we can't do that. It's not safe for you to think that way. Now, am I saying that all spiritual environments are bad and everybody there's out to get you? No. But just like you would vet, a person that you were going to be romantically involved with, or maybe somebody that you were going to employ or have, in your home, you do the same due diligence with spiritual environments. Um, and even with mental health too, sometimes these environments, I see a Tom here saying OMG exactly. Yeah, I'm not sure what you're saying exactly too, but it looks like someone, maybe in the comments or what I said, resonated with you. But yeah, even with mental health concerns, be careful what you disclose. Sometimes people have talked about how their mental health concerns were used against them and shared publicly. Maybe their name wasn't being used, but everybody knew that it was them that was being talked about. So if you are given a questionnaire and you feel like the questions are intrusive and not too personal, don't answer them. Right? We have to remember that spiritual environments work very differently from other places. So, for instance, certain places cannot release private information about you without your permission, but spiritual environments are under no such obligation to do so, that they can release whatever they want about whoever they want. And so you need to be careful and understand that. Um, yeah, these spiritual environments, the church should be Christ-like spiritually, lifting people up, not all the bickering and debating. Yeah. And a lot of that, bickering and debating over things, sometimes it might be over things that maybe are more, there's a word I'm looking for, it's escaping my mind. I think the word is trivial, but things that are really not that important, right? So, vet these places. Um, Make sure you know how your information is being used. If you're in doubt, don't share things. And even when it comes to your mental health as well, make sure that some one thing that is another red flag about a spiritual environment is when they claim to be the experts on everything, right? So you wouldn't go to a mechanic to get help for your finances, right? So if you need help with your finances and stuff, you go to a financial planner, a financial advisor. If you need help with your house, you would go to a contractor, or someone who can fix things in your house, right? You go to a qualified professional. And so people in spiritual environments, unless they are a licensed professional, do not have the training and do not have the qualifications to give you accurate advice about mental health issues. And I know that's going to rub some people the wrong way, and that's fine. Um, You wouldn't go to somebody who's not a physician for a medical issue, right? People who practice medicine have to get a license, they have to meet certain qualifications. And so when somebody who is unqualified and untrained in mental health issues is telling you this is the reason why you have a mental illness and this is what you need to do to get rid of it, that's a red flag. And I'm not saying that people who are spiritual, or that's not the word I'm looking for. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that spirituality can influence mental health, of course, and there are relationships between both. But if you're in a situation where you are being shamed and criticized for having mental health concerns and being told that it's due to a moral failure or something wrong with you spiritually, pay attention to that and note that, because that's a concern. There's there it's important that you take these things with caution. Let's see. Yeah. Any other questions that you all have? Let's see. I think I've answered. It's scary how many people work beyond their experience and expertise and can do harm. Yes. Yeah, it is. And you hear about these, people on the news sometimes that are, these quacks, these snake oil salesmen, and they'll get cease and desist letters saying you need to stop doing this, stop practicing medicine or whatever without a license. And so if people who are doing that in the community are going to get reprimanded, then the same standard should hold for spiritual places, right? And so that's important. Of course, you can, someone who is in functioning in the place of a, spiritual leader or advisor, they can discuss how spirituality can interact with mental health. If somebody is going through a spiritual crisis or having concerns about their spirituality, of course, it can show up in their mental health presentation and vice versa. But to take the place of a licensed professional and say, take this medicine, don't take this medicine, stop this, don't do that, this is the reason why you have this, that is practicing without a license. And it's operating outside your realm of expertise and experience. So that's a great point, Michelle. Tom says, this really helps me understand how important it is to protect yourself. Good, I'm glad to hear that. And you have every right to protect yourself. You will hear people tell you that you are being what's the word I'm looking for? Not skeptical. You're jaded, you're bitter, you don't trust people. And that's okay. Sometimes I think we have to get at the point too where I'm not saying that what people say about us shouldn't hurt, but you have to kind of get to the point where you're okay with people putting labels on you for you doing what you need to do that's best for yourself. So I've talked about this in one of the videos about how vulnerability is weaponized by spiritually abusive people. And so you might hear things like, well, you need to be more vulnerable. You need to share more and whatnot. And you share when you're ready to, and you share when you feel like it's safe to. You are absolutely well within your rights to protect yourself. And there's nothing wrong with that. And why healthy boundaries absolutely do matter. Yes. Yeah. There was a live we did, probably was maybe 1 or 2 weeks ago about our boundaries. And that's really important. And another red flag is when people shame you for having boundaries. When people shame you for having boundaries that are healthy and well within your rights to have, that indicates that they feel that they are entitled to whatever you're protecting. So for instance, maybe you say that you're not available at a certain time to help with something, and they want to shame you for that, or say, well, you should be available to us at all times or whatever. That's problematic. It's your time, and it's your time to give as you feel led to do so. It's not for someone else to dictate for you. So absolutely hold on to those boundaries. In fact, I'll ask you that in the comments. What boundaries do you all have? You know, what boundaries are important for you to have and maintain? It's really important before you go into any kind of environment to agree, you know, to have, you know, I would even encourage writing it down, what your boundaries are around certain things. You know, a friend of mine said that anything that they felt got in the way of their relationship with their spouse, them and their spouse both agree that they would let that thing go. So if there was something within the spiritual environment that was either causing them to argue a lot or getting in the way of their relationship, they said, you know what, our relationship is not going to be sacrificed on the altar of this church or whatever it is. So they said, forget it. And I think that's an important boundary to have. Tom says, have to be more transparent. Yeah, that's a shaming tactic. You don't have to be transparent if you don't want to. Your transparency with somebody is your choice, and you have every right to determine what you want to share and how you want to share it, right? So that transparency is a huge red flag. I agree, especially when it's placed under the category of like confession, right? So people will say, oh, you should confess these things, and if you don't, you're not being transparent and whatnot. So that's a big one. Oh, I like this one. I'm more comfortable saying no, or I am not sure yet. Let me think about it. Let me sleep on it. Yeah, I think that's great. And I think a good leader in a healthy environment will have that built into what they ask. Hey, you know, we're thinking about, you know, we would like for you to do this. We'll check back with you in a week. Let us know in a week. Take all the time you need to think about it. This is when we'll need an answer by. And they put the ball in your court. That's a green flag for me. And it's not just saying it. It's also, I said green flag, I meant green light. Um, a green light, and not only saying it but actually acting that way. So they say they're going to give you a week to think about it. They shouldn't be contacting you or pressuring you in that week span. So let's see. That's a good one. My experience with boundaries is this: you respect theirs and they don't respect yours. This was over and over. Yeah, that goes back to the double standards we talked about before, and how the needs and the preferences of the leader are prioritized over that of everybody else. So, you know, you can't ask certain things of them, right? If you ask questions, well, how is the money being spent? Or, you know, why, you know, what happened with this issue I brought up with you? Oh, well, you can't, you know, they might give you a response like, that's none of your business, or you don't need to know that. But then they are in your business and expecting you to be very transparent and forthcoming about things that you wish to remain private. So that double standard too is a big red flag. And it's important too with boundaries. Sometimes we think that we have to tell people what they are, but it's more important that we enact that, right? So you all have talked about that and have shown healthy boundaries in what you've done. So for instance, not sharing everything, holding a part of yourself back, that's showing that you have a boundary around your privacy and your autonomy. You know, blocking people on social media, right? That's a boundary as well. If you find engaging with somebody to be problematic, then you block them, or whatever it is you need to do, or saying no, or leaving. And so a lot of times we don't even need to really communicate those boundaries. We just, we just enact them, and that's that. So this was a great discussion. It's already been an hour and a half. Time really has flown. It doesn't seem like I've been on here for that long, but it has. Um, yeah, the when we think about just this whole issue of spiritual abuse and mental health, it's up to you to take priority and take charge of your mental health. We can't leave that to the spiritual environment. And so it's also important to know that as well. Sometimes we go into these environments having expectations that are the expectations we have may put us in harm's way. So when we think about our mental health, spirituality can be a part of that, but we can't rely on that spiritual environment to be an answer to mental health concerns. And I think that's important for us to be able to make that distinction. Um, when you see what a healthy spiritual environment looks like, and you see how that contrasts from a spiritually abusive environment, then it's going to be easier for you to know when you should stay and when you should leave. When you're in a healthy spiritual environment, you are going to feel and be supported instead of being um, dominated and controlled. Oh, that's a nice comment here. Michelle says, my first live video. Thank you. This has been really helpful. Of course, it's great to have you here. I see you in the comments, so it's great to be able to interact with you via live, via comments. And I'm curious too if it's anyone else's first live, because I see some of you in the comments. So it's nice to be able to interact with you. Interact with you this way in real time. So any other last thoughts, questions, or comments? These are some great comments that you all have posted here, and I really am encouraged and just really thrilled to see how you all are so supportive of one another. Well, thank you, A Rare Breed. I enjoyed having you here, and thank you for sharing your experiences. I know you've been through a lot of really challenging things, but thank you for sharing your stories with us, and I hope that you are, that things are getting better for you. And for all of us, when we think about recovery from spiritual abuse, it is not a once and done thing, like you just flip a switch and it's done. For many of us, it can take time to process what we've been through and make the steps we need to for our recovery. So be patient with yourself and be kind to yourself. All right. Any other questions or comments? So you'll the live video will be up as soon as this is done. So if you happen to miss it and you're on the replay, comment there as well. Parts of my family were abused in my childhood too. Yeah, a lot of people that have been through spiritual abuse have also had some other type of abuse in their life. And I think that's what can make the spiritually abusive experience so painful, is that for some people, they're seeking that spiritual environment as a place of solace and a place of recovery from abuse they have suffered in other parts of their life. So when that environment now heaps on that abuse, that can be extra painful. Oh, thank you, Tom. Tom says, thank you so much. I can't tell enough how helpful you've been. Well, thank you for showing up here today. I think this is your first time. Thank you for your comments and your questions. Every comment and question that comes through is really helpful, because whatever question or comment you have, I'm sure probably other people have too. And so by sharing that, it really helps steer the discussion in ways that can help meet people's needs. Um, Yeah. So, and last thing I would say, since we're talking about mental health, oh, thank you. Tom says you're a godsend. Yeah. Well, I feel like the same with all of you. I feel like people are, we're all here together to support each other and help each other. It can be something that can be very challenging about spiritually abusive environments, that there's often so much dismissal and invalidation. And so people feel um, hesitant to share what they've been through because they don't want to feel like their experience is minimized. So that's why it's great to see how people here are interacting with one another and being so supportive of one another as well. So just a last comment here on mental health. If you are having mental health concerns, I encourage you to find a licensed professional to help you with that. And there are different websites that you can go to as well. There's one, I think, called adaa.org. Let's see. I think that's what it's called. I actually don't remember now. Something for depression. Yeah, Anxiety and Depression Association of America. So that's one place that you can go to. There's also the National Institutes of Mental Health. These are places where they have uh, accurate, scientifically supported articles on mental health concerns. And it's really important too that you familiarize yourself with resources about mental health by qualified professionals. A lot of people have talked about how their understanding of mental health changed so much once they left that spiritually abusive environment. The environment was telling them things about mental health that simply weren't true. And either weren't true or they had a grain of truth to them, but it was an incomplete picture. So look up resources. If you feel that you need to speak to a counselor, make sure that they're licensed. There are plenty places that you can find somebody. If you find a therapist and you don't like them and it doesn't work out, then look for another one. Sometimes people are put off by having a bad experience with a therapist and they don't want to go to therapy anymore. Well, I can understand that. It's going to take some time and effort on your part to find the right match. So those are some resources you can use. What else? I think that's it. So I really enjoyed talking with all of you. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day wherever you are. It's night here where I am. So wherever you are, whatever time zone you're in, I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day. I hope it's peaceful, and also do some things too with the remaining time you have during the day to take care of yourself. So whatever that is, maybe making yourself a cup of tea or watching something that will make you laugh or talking to a friend or giving someone a hug or getting a hug from someone. All right. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you all so much and have a wonderful night. Bye-bye.